talk about all of the interesting things that I've done in my life. My husband came up with this idea, and I guess it's a good idea. So let me go back, way, way back. One summer, I think it was when I was in college, I was doing some work for a temporary agency, and they called me on the phone, and they asked me how I felt about sitting in a freezer for an entire day. I'd be wearing a coat, and they wanted me to measure French fries. Yes, French fries. So I accepted the job because at the time it paid well. I think it was probably $15 an hour, and this was probably in the early 70s. And I was a kid. You know, it was summertime between semesters. So they had me go to this, I guess, warehouse, and they had giant bags of French fries, and other people were there as well. And what they were doing was measuring and counting French fries that had been manufactured on one side of the country, and they were being transported to the other side of the country, and they were unpacking the French fries, I think at 2 or 3 different places across the country. And at each place they had people like myself sitting in a freezer, and we had to measure all the French fries and line them up according to how many inches they were, and then give a total count. And I guess basically they were trying different kinds of packaging and wanted to see what was going to be a successful packaging for those French fries. So that was one of the most interesting things I did. I'm trying to think. I also worked as a photo mate. Do you remember back in the day there used to be these little huts in parking lots? And you would take your film there to be developed. So there was one called Photomat. And I got a job, I think I was still in high school at the time. So it was a part-time job that I think I did in the evenings sometimes and on weekends. And people would come and drop off their film. And so when the film came back after it was processed, they would come and I would ring up the sales. But in the meantime, while I was waiting for them to come, of course, curiosity got the best of me. So I would go through all of the packages, and I used to see some very, very unusual photos, some disgusting photos, some photos that probably would be great evidence nowadays in, I don't know, child sex porn acts, whatever. But that was an interesting job. So then we move on through my normal employment when I worked as a director and then vice president of human resources, and then I had my own restaurant. And then, as if you saw my introductory video, you know that during my second marriage, I was looking for something to do, and I created a line of vibrators, actually Rabbit vibrators. And I had a whole line of other adult products. And I created a home party plan selling adult products for intimacy. It was fun while it lasted. I just couldn't make enough money doing it. So between divorces, actually not between divorces, after my second divorce, and long before I met my current and last husband, the one I'm keeping forever and ever, I was desperate for work. And I live here in South Florida, and on the other coast is Miami. And at the time, they were shooting a lot of commercials, television, and TV series over in Miami and in the Fort Lauderdale, Miami area. So I came up with the idea. I was throwing anything against the wall to see what would stick. And I thought maybe it would be fun to be in commercials or be in a TV show or something. I had no clue. And I went on Craigslist and I found this, this very small company, and they used to do seminars on getting into the business of working in television, or working on movie sets, or working in commercials. And so I took a seminar. Actually, I took a few, and they also had some acting classes, and I took a few acting classes with these two ladies. And then I had headshots done. They recommended a photographer over in Miami that did beautiful headshots. As a matter of fact, the same photographer also did our wedding pictures when Jeff and I got married. So I had headshots done, and then I started sending them out to agents. In the state of Florida, I don't know what it's like now because I don't do a whole lot of it now, but it used to be that you could have as many agents as would take you on as a client. So what you had to do was send out acting resumes and little tchotchkes so the agents would remember who you are and go to every audition you could possibly go to. So that's what I was doing. So eventually, I got my very first job as an extra. And I worked on a TV show called The Glades. It was on A&E, I think for 2 or 3 seasons. And it starred Matt Passmore. And this was where I made my debut working as an extra. So my very first day, I drove all the way across to Miami, and at the time, I was living 3 hours away. But this was a new adventure for me, and I just thought, who knows, maybe I'll be discovered and find a way to make a fortune to support myself. So you show up and you sign in when you get there. You go into a tent and you sign in. Actually, I should back up a step. You get there when it's dark, very dark. I had a call time, I think the first time, 5 o'clock in the morning. So you drive to this parking lot at 5 o'clock in the morning in Miami, and when you park your car, there is a guy in the dark with a flashlight who guides you to the end of the parking lot where there is a van waiting, and then the van takes you to a tent. And the tent is like where you check in, and you fill out all the tax forms and everything, and then they send you to wardrobe. And prior to this, showing up, I had to wait for whoever sent me the notice of the role that I was going to play. Literally hours before I went to bed the night before, they sent me a list of the wardrobe I needed to bring. So I would rush around the house and I would get all this wardrobe and then put it in suitcases. And then when you show up the next day, you bring all your wardrobe in suitcases. So after you check in, they send you to the wardrobe people. And the wardrobe people see what the part is that you have been selected for. And then they look at the wardrobe that you brought along with you and they have you try it on. And they either say okay to whatever you brought, or they may give you something out of wardrobe and say, no, wear this instead. And then you throw on the jewelry. Literally, you have to show up with jewelry, shoes, everything they tell you to bring based on whatever your part is. So once you get all dressed up in your outfit, some of the movie sets or TV sets have you go to hair and makeup. Once you get all dressed up in your outfit, and I worked on The Glades, you had to show up with your face, the makeup already done on your face. So there was no makeup for me other than the makeup I showed up in. And the acting class that I had taken, the ladies there who gave that seminar gave me a good idea of how my makeup needed to be done to show up set ready or screen ready. So then you go to the set and you just sit there. And you just wait. And on that particular day, they saw me in the crowd. It was being shot in an old carpet warehouse, and there was no heat. I'm sorry, there was no air conditioning. Heat would have been, I don't know, there was plenty of outside. So anyway, it was being shot in an old carpet warehouse where there was no air conditioning. And they had turned the old carpet warehouse into multiple sets for this TV show. And so on the outside of that building, they set it up to look like a hospital. And I even showed up there. I was driving a Mercedes convertible, and they gave me $25 extra to allow them to use my car in the parking lot scene outside of the hospital. Unbeknownst to me, they were also staging a hurricane. So, but it wasn't actually happening while we were shooting the scene, but they had leaves and palms and everything thrown on top of my car to look like it had been there through a hurricane. So they spotted me in the crowd and had me go over. They had this scene where I was going to play a person that was coming out of the hospital having visited a patient there. So I came out of the hospital and I had to walk down the street. As I was walking down the sidewalk, Matt Passmore, who was playing a detective, showed up in a car, and he got out of his car just as I crossed his path, or he got into my path, and then he turned towards the hospital, and I just kept on walking until I was out of sight. And I didn't know this until after I watched the show on TV. But once he got onto the sidewalk and took a right to go towards the hospital, he turned around and he did a double take to take a look at me walking. Or an episode of Burn Notice where I had to show up on the hottest day in July, actually the hottest night. We had to be there at 6 o'clock in the evening. We had to be dressed in full business attire, a winter coat, hat, gloves, boots. We were going to be walking down the street, supposedly during rush hour. Everybody's leaving work, and it's snowing very heavily. And they had blown the streets with fake snow all over the place. But it was very, very hot. It was in July, and we had to do that scene over and over and over again. And the only winter coat I had, having moved from the north quite a few years before, I had gotten rid of my regular cloth winter coat. So I had a mink coat. So I was wearing a heavy full-length mink coat, hat, gloves, scarf, all of this, and it was so, so hot. And for some reason, the production people never offered us any water, and we were dying out there. Fortunately, after a few hours, it started raining, and they called it a night, and we got to go home, and that was the end of that. Unfortunately, when Burn Notice was on, the scene that I had spent all night working on in that fur coat was turned into silhouettes. They had silhouettes across the top of the screen instead of the actual people. So it was a shame, but it was another part of my experience. I also played a cruise passenger on a remake of Charlie's Angels. And I had a Latino husband, and the guy who played my husband didn't speak any English, for real. And my Spanish was really lacking. So he and I were like joined at the hip, pretending to be husband and wife, just boarding a cruise ship. And the whole thing was shot actually on a rooftop of a hotel in South Beach in Miami. So, and that one actually made it to the screen as well, so that was fun. I also worked on a TV series called Bloodline that was on Netflix. And my husband actually worked on that as well. I had gotten him involved in that, and soon they started calling him more than they were calling me. But in one of the last episodes of Bloodline, I played two parts actually. First, they had me driving I had a little blue Volkswagen EOS convertible, and they were doing a scene where they wanted to show cars in the background. I drove my car around the block in South Beach in Miami. I'm sorry, not South Beach in Miami. It was just downtown Miami. I drove my car around and around and around and around many times, and it was in the still, like the thumbnail on Netflix when that episode first came out. And then for some reason you didn't see it again. You'd have to look really close to see me in that blue car driving around with the top down. So that episode, I think it was called There's Nothing Left Here. And I was in a scene at a bus station, just walking out of a bus station in Miami. And I didn't even realize I made it to the screen when we were watching it on television. We went very slow right around the time that I would have been in the scene. And if you happen to have watched Bloodline, Danny, who was one of the lead characters, was at the bus station, and I walked right past him in the scene. So that was my other scene. And then my husband and I, we got to go to Miami, where they were shooting a pilot. ABC was shooting a pilot called Las Renas. So we spent, I guess it was the better part of a day, as party guests, that was our part, at a big mansion on Star Island, which is the big exclusive island where all of the celebrities live, have these big houses. That was wonderful. Unfortunately, ABC didn't pick up the pilot, so we never got to the screen. And the very last thing that we both did was a show called The Last Thing He Wanted. It was on Netflix also. It was a movie. And it had Ben Affleck and Anne Hathaway. So I played an attendee at a convention for Reagan. I was a Reagan supporter. It took place around the time of Reagan's election. So it's interesting because it was shot in a hotel, and they had put out a call for 500 people to be in the auditorium of this hotel so they could shoot this rally. And only 300 people showed up, and I was one of them. So they literally had to shoot this scene. The scene was taking place on the stage, and Reagan, the person who played Reagan, was speaking, and Anne Hathaway played a reporter, and she was there. She walked up on the stage and got knocked off the stage, and that was part of the storyline, although that part didn't show up in the actual film. But anyway, when they were shooting the rally, they had all of us who had been picked as attendees or rallies or Reagan supporters. They had us sit in the first section of the auditorium, and then they shot the entire scene with us sitting in that one section. Then they moved all of us to the next section of this big auditorium, and we had to mix ourselves up. And then they shot the scene again. And they did that. We literally spent, I think we started shooting that at 8:30 in the morning, and we were finally finished at 11:30 that night. And we were holding signs, campaign signs for Reagan, and yelling and screaming, and balloons fell, and it was quite an experience. And that particular movie, my husband Jeff got a part. He played a senator in a hearing. He was literally spending the evening sitting across from Ben Affleck for the evening, and he played a senator that was watching a trial. So he was very excited about that. I mean, you'd get a good look at him. But anyway, so we spent all day together. This was one of the things we worked on together that was probably the longest. So when we were all finished, Anne Hathaway let everybody go at 11:30. I mean, we watched her do a scene over and over and over again. And she promised all of us a picture. If we would just leave our name and address, she would send us an autographed picture. So Actually, it took a year for us to receive the picture, but we finally got the picture. So let me show you the picture. It says, to Jeff and Ann, thanks for spending the day with me on set. Anne Hathaway. So we're very proud of that. So those are my interesting jobs. I haven't done anything that exciting and far out in a little while with COVID. They're not doing so much on the other coast as far as movies. And there used to be a tax incentive for production companies to come to Florida and use Florida residents in the production. And the last governor got rid of that, actually 2 governors ago, nixed that from the budget, and as a result, production companies have no incentive to really come to Florida. The movie, The Last Thing He Wanted, was kind of a rare thing. We hadn't been called in quite a while. So I guess when they came to make this partially in Florida, I think it was also shot in Puerto Rico as well, they weren't so concerned about tax incentives. So anyway, those are some of the interesting things, more interesting things that I've done in my lifetime. I have had a very interesting and fun life.